sit back in your seats, get something to eat, and watch this movie. Don't let the kiddies see it, because, well, we'll let you hear the beginning first. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Closet Chat. I'm Sunny.
I'm Rainy.
So, Rainy, my dear co-host, how are you
Yes.
doing?
I am here.
And I am queer. And here. I am present in this room.
Yeah.
This
Me
very,
too.
very tiny space.
Yep.
Would a closet be considered a room?
Yeah, it would be your room as long as, I would say as long as you're able to stand and move around somewhat.
So,
It's a room.
What makes it a room? Is it like the door?
Yeah, there's a door.
But what about a room without a door? Is it still a room?
No, that's a cage.
Wait, I thought a cage typically had a door.
It does, but a cage can also be a way that you can't easily get out unless someone from the outside is able.
But what about like an open room?
Well, it's an open room then.
Is the kitchen considered a room?
Yeah.
And the dining?
Yeah.
Anyways.
I was wondering, where was this going?
I don't know. Alright, guys. So, for today's episode, tell me what we're doing.
Well, we decide we're going to have another crack at the Reddit section r/letsnotmeet.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was quite fun to read those.
It was. And it seems like we're on a bit of a creepy kick.
Yeah. How long it's going to be? I don't know. We don't know.
We'll see, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we decided to pick 2 stories each. So, who should go first?
I say youngest should go first.
Oh, god damn it. Okay, fine. If that's the rule of thumb we're following, which I guess we always do. All right. So for the first story, it is the title is "Don't Follow Vultures." It is by Don't Follow 2, and this was written 8 years ago.
Ooh.
When I was younger, about 10 years ago, I got into bird watching. I was about 12, so it wasn't really official by any means. I was just some kid that liked to sneak up on birds, take pictures, and look them up in books. I decided to start this hobby by making a list, with pictures I had printed from the library of native birds in my region. Every weekend, I'd wander around the neighborhood, which was suburbs smashed haltingly against large plots of land covered in brush, in search of new birds. With a few ponds and a large creek in the area, I found quite a few within my first weeks. However, there was one bird I had set as my sort of white whale due to its rarity in the area, black vulture. We have tons of turkey vultures in my area. They are most common, but much fewer black vulture. They are a bit hard to tell the difference. They are flying too high. The best way to determine which vulture it is has to do with how much gray-white is on their wings. If they get closer, you can eventually make out the red head of turkey vulture, as I often did. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the exact date or what month it even was. I believe sometime in the fall, however. But one weekend, I decided to spend the next 2 days searching high and low for the black vulture. I went climbing over the small wire fencing around a nearby brushy area. As per usual, keep out signs be damned, and searched. Usually you had the best luck finding scavenger birds on roadkill, besides the road. And there so happened to be a small 2-lane winder, so a 2-lane winder that mirrored the creek nearby, just through the foliage. So I cut across this sort of mini forest, heading in that direction. As much as it made me sad to see a dead deer or possum, it was a common sight on this road, as both sides are open, with trees and undergrowth almost choking it. There are some parts of the road that almost become a sort of tunnel due to the leaves intertwining above. It was incredibly easy for a deer or some other animal to jump out in front of a car, in the dark, with neither party realizing until it was too late. I didn't have much luck. There were a few crows on the smear of a squirrel, and I saw a few ducks swimming the creek beside me, but nothing big. It started getting late. The sun was still up, and despite the dangers of walking down a forest road in the dark, I was determined to stay out for as long as possible. I decided to reach a small park area at the end of the road, and then I'd make my way back. I went under a small tunnel of leaves and came out the other side, and was delighted to see the familiar shape of a large bird in the sky, circling. It was just the right shape and size to be a vulture, but I had no hope of checking for the grayness of its feathers as the sunlight was limited. Instead, I was stuck following it as it slowly began to sink lower. After about 10 or so minutes, it landed, and I carefully snuck forward, cautiously avoiding anything that could alert the bird of my presence. Sunk low to the ground, realizing that the bird had landed in a small clearing at the far end of the park. It was just a small open field, slightly tilted down a hill, with the parking lot on the top. I'd been there before, as it was a fun spot for kids to roll down the hill because of how steep it was. I approached it from the bottom, excitement brimming when I heard several squawks and shrieks of other birds. Black vultures are more aggressive than turkeys, and I was hoping to catch a spat. I got to the edge of the clearing and pulled out my binoculars. Two things kind of hit me at once here. One, I found it odd that they were in the middle of the park rather than closer to the road, where you'd assume they'd find roadkill. Though, I reasoned, things could die anywhere, even in the middle of the park. However, secondly, it smelled awful. The scent was rather light, but I've been known to have a really sensitive nose, and just this sharp, coppery scent, like when you pull rotten ground meat out of a bag. I'd smelled roadkill before, and in the heat of the day, it smelled bad, but nothing like this. When I put my binoculars to my eyes, I expected a deer corpse and birds fighting. I never in a million years thought I would see a corpse of a different kind. The birds were there, and I remember the faint pang of excitement I still had, recognizing the proud head of a black vulture before the image of it sitting on the chest of a naked woman sucked the life out of me. I was frozen, and I could not look away. My throat tightened with vomit. The birds had done surprisingly little to her body. She had what I think were cuts, but most of her was intact. What wasn't, the birds were at. Her eyes, lips, and genitals were red and shredded. If there was a big defining wound, I missed it, between the gathering of birds and the fading light, but what I did see I can never forget. I haven't forgotten. I could pull up the image so clearly now, even after all this time. She was pale, almost blue in places, blonde crinkled hair. I sat there, stupidly, for who knows how long, as the sun sank behind the trees. This was a time before cell phones were a common thing. I had quite the hike back home. I realized now I was in shock, and I could only move when the sudden fear that whoever did this could be nearby hit me. I forced myself to slowly waddle backwards into the trees, not taking my eyes off the body. I didn't want to turn around for some reason. I was so scared someone would be behind me. I thought if I just backed up forever, maybe nothing would happen. It was dusk, and suddenly there was light. I beamed from the top of the hill, a single pair. I heard the screech of tires as the car wheeled out. I listened to it veer off to the left and away down the road, opposite in the direction I was headed. That was the last straw, and I ran the entire way back the second I could no longer hear it. I crashed through at least a mile of brush, and while I was smart enough to have my boots and thick jeans on, my arms were bare and bleeding by the time I stopped. Paused midway through the brush by my house, realizing that, embarrassingly, I'd pissed myself in fear at some point, before nearly crawling my way through people's yards to get home, avoiding all passing cars. The horror didn't completely end there, as I was home alone until past midnight. My mom worked late at a diner nearby. It's stupid, and I regret it to this day, but no, I did not call the police instantly, nor my mom. I was stupidly afraid that if I did, my mom would get mad at me. I would never be allowed to go outside again, or worse, that they wouldn't believe me for some reason. I locked all the doors, double-checked, took a quick shower, and locked myself in my room. I'd fallen asleep somehow by the time my mom came home. I confronted her in the morning at least, but by that time when we made the call together, the body had already been found. They took my statement. We never got any calls back. I stopped bird watching. I tried my best to find an article or news somewhere about this, but I failed in finding anything. It probably doesn't help that I can't remember the exact date. I have a lot of missing time from ages 12 to 14 for some reason I can't even begin to explain. There are a few things I remember so well, this being a big one. I have never shared this story with anyone outside of my own family, but I thought it might fit here, and I apologize if not. It was sort of therapeutic, I think, writing this out after so long. I want to try to keep finding something to verify this, and I'll update as soon as I can if possible.
Wow.
Yeah, I kind of expected it to go that way, but damn, that sounds traumatic.
Yeah, like I don't blame OP for them not calling the police immediately because like honestly, any of us could have that same reaction of
Mm-hmm.
just seeing a dead body under vultures.
Well, yeah, and
And
the OP, the they were 12 years
they were
old.
12 years old. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no way a kid could like for a kid to process that. Like they're not gonna know how to react because that's gonna be the first time they're gonna see something like that. Like I don't blame OP.
Yeah, and they didn't have cell phones back then, and they were like pretty far from home. They were by themselves. Like that's terrifying.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's Don't Follow Vultures. That was written
Yeah.
8 years ago, for quite a while. So this was
Yeah.
found this in a compilation of top tier like Let's Not Meet stories, I guess. But yeah, Rainy,
Yeah.
you may go for it.
Oh my god. I don't know if I can top that. Like,
I mean, we'll see. I didn't expect to start off that dark.
yeah. Alrighty. Alrighty. So my first story, it's not going to be as long as Sunny's, but it is something that really caught my interest. The old woman in the cinema thought I was a demon. And this is by Reddit user Familiar Focus 8062. This was made 2 months ago.
All right.
Alright. Quite an odd title, I know, but this is the only way I can describe what she meant. This actually happened a few years ago, right before the pandemic hit. In fact, I know the exact date because it spooked me to my core. It was February 18th, 2020. I was 14 years old, so you can imagine this was a pretty frightening moment for a young girl. My mother, younger brother, and I went to go see a movie. He wanted to see the new Sonic movie, and I didn't really want to, so I went to see Birds of Prey movie with Harley Quinn. I had already seen the movie, but I wanted to enjoy the cinema popcorn and hot dogs and quite frankly wanted to watch it again. I had gone off by myself to the viewing room and it was completely empty. Just me in there, so I felt relatively safe being able to see the whole room given I was at the very top. It was pretty amazing to have an entire room to yourself. Until it's not. About halfway through the film, I went to the restroom. The soda didn't last long. So I went to the restroom, and once again, it was just me in there. Every room was in current running progress, so nobody wanted to miss the films. As I was finishing up there, an elderly woman was at the sink, about 70. I thought I was alone, but I suppose not. She was washing her hands right next to me. She had moved from her original spot. Now, for context, before I say what she said to me, I'll give you a brief description of myself. I have black hair, green eyes, relatively sharp features, high cheekbones, and an arched brows. Yeah, a typical Disney villain, which I somehow blame for her response. I think I'm somewhat attractive, but nothing to lose your marbles over. She had looked at me with the most subtle yet unnerving grin, still with her hands under the water, but not doing anything, and said, "Young lady, you are quite a gorgeous girl." I said thank you, and she went on to say, "A beauty like that is only something an evil thing can have. Your eyes are just so hollow and soulless." She continued with that same damn smile.
Holy fuck.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
there's more. I was seriously starting to get creeped out, but I do live in the Bible Belt of Texas, so I chalked it up to her being a nut job. But then she got closer and said, without the smile, "You shouldn't have that beauty." I hurried and left as soon as I possibly could. I didn't like being alone with that woman anymore, and I waited outside the restroom when it was populated, but she never came out. After 5 minutes, I went back to the viewing room and was paranoid the entire rest of the film. I could not get that crazy lady out of my head. Like, who says that to a kid? I seriously considered getting exorcised by a priest after that encounter. After that, I told my mother, and she didn't let me go alone until I was at least 16. Never do I want to see that woman again. I still get paranoid after that anytime I'm alone in a public restroom. In fact, I avoid them altogether. Still don't know what to make of it.
That's so creepy.
That is disturbing.
Also, that is so much shorter than mine. Oh my god. I didn't
Yeah.
realize mine would be so long. But honestly, the whole living in the Bible Belt,
Yeah.
while I myself am fortunate to never had like encounters like that, I am not terribly surprised. I mean, I've had some pretty weird shit happen, but that was mostly with like the homeless.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah. Like I don't even know where the Bible Belt of Texas is right now.
Well, we are like in the Bible Belt.
Oh, we
like,
are?
Yeah, it's like the entirety of Texas, basically.
Oh.
Because the Bible Belt is more of like just different states that are very Christian.
Oh yeah.
At least that's what my understanding of it is.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's just I think me personally I probably wouldn't go out after that. That would have freaked me out entirely.
I think I would have been really freaked out, but like honestly, if I had heard that now, I would let it get to my head. I'd be like, "You think I'm beautiful? Thanks. You
Yeah.
think I'm evil because I'm hot? You shouldn't have said that. Hail Satan."
I was gonna be like, oh yes, I made a deal with Satan to look this beautiful.
I'd be like, yeah, that's why I'm so hot. I got the devil inside me.
Yeah, but honestly, for a 14-year-old, that is disturbing.
Yeah, that's scary, especially when you're entirely alone until you're not. Like, that line in itself is like, ugh, creepy.
Yeah. I was wondering, where did that woman come from?
Honestly, the fact that she never apparently left to, like, the bathroom, like, I kind of wonder, like, to be fair, she could be, like, mentally ill or something.
Yeah.
Or just incredibly religious.
Yeah.
Or just petty.
I have no idea, but that was disturbing.
Yeah, she's like, damn, maybe she always wanted to be beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, Opie, I really hope that you never meet that woman again. Because,
yeah. All right. Well, like I said, my first one was pretty long. Would you want me to read my next one, or do you want to like read yours? Just like
my next one's actually kind of long.
Okay, because mine is kind of long. However, I can try to like go through it pretty quickly. All right. This one is called Knees in the Trees by Secret Sake. It was written 3 years ago. Hey y'all, this happened today. My gut says something's wrong. This has been my daily sub since joining Reddit years ago. I know you're the right community to bounce this experience off of. I've moved to a mid to small Midwest American town with my boyfriend and 2 doggies last June for my doctoral internship year. It was an adjustment after living in a southern beach town, as well as a major city before that. Our living space is one of the factors that have made this a more positive experience. We're on one side of a twinplex, 2-story home with a dividing wall that sits on 2 acres with some tread areas around it. Our landlord is a retired man in his 60s, kind and gets stuff done quick. There's a badass single mom and her kids and a huge Akita and a firearm on their other side of the twinplex. The kids are ages 17, 13, and 8 years. The family is wonderful. This story isn't about them. It's about the man next door. I got a weird vibe from him the first time we met. Not a knee-jerk reaction or anything, just sort of a question mark hovering above his head. Like drawing a blank. In lieu of overt negative interactions, my boyfriend and I have been your typical level of neighborhood friendly. We give the wave here and there and have no active grudge against him. Although my boyfriend doesn't have the same instinct about the man, he trusts mine. It's nothing I can point to, which, as we all know, means nothing. Gift of fear, y'all. Or LNM Bible. I'm thrown off by this man. It doesn't keep me up at night, and it's not something I ruminate on. But it's idling in the back of my mind every time I take the dogs in our large backyard in view of his home. I've been thinking back to the very few interactions I've had with this man, which I can count on one hand. The first interaction we ever had was due to a dog fight. In fall of 2019, a big male dog with no collar showed up on our property and approached my big dog. The dog wasn't displaying threatening posture, he was only curious. Unfortunately, my usually mushy gush snuggle bean boxer mix got attacked badly a few years ago by another dog, and he's got a little doggy trauma now. Anytime he sees a male dog his size or larger, or appears larger due to floofs, he gets hyper vigilant. He misinterprets any wrong move as ready to attack and attacks first. Think along the lines of the ready at the moment PTSD response soldier, the fight side of the fight, flight, freeze, appease reaction. So Big Dog didn't take kindly to this undignified dog fella. He responded like you'd expect and went after him. I saw two men standing about 50 yards away, near the house in the yard next door. I assumed the uncollared dog belonged to one of them, and called out for them to help break it up and retrieve their dog. The two men ran over and broke it up. Meanwhile, I'm standing there, hitting the dogs with my dog's leash, trying to stop them. Vicious snarls and all, which I am 100% sure was as dumb looking as it was ineffective. The other dog ran off. For your peace of mind, by the way, that little sweetie is just fine. He escaped unscathed, aside from puncture wounds on his neck that require no veterinary action. So there I was, sobbing, thanking both of the men for breaking it up. Turns out it wasn't their dog at all. The neighbor said he's seen the dog around and believes he tends to get out and thinks he knows where the dog lives. They were kind and reassured me my dog was in the right protective mode, and the other dog running up to him on the property was easily interpreted as a threat to him. The conversation was without incident. I thanked them and brought Big Dog back inside. Another interaction we had was a few months later, when the neighbor was in his yard, appropriate distance away. Now is taking out Big Dog and Small Dog. Small Dog is a perma puppy-sized beagle. Trouble with a capital T, but disgustingly sweet and cute. Big Dog is well trained and can be off leash in appropriate areas, no problem. My neighbor says hello and made conversation about how he's never sure if he's able to pet my dog because he always barks at him from our window. I assured him Big Dog is extremely friendly, not to worry. I also made an irritating mental note that the neighbor inquired about Big Dog's threat level, and I told him he's zero threat at all. I don't know about y'all, but my automatic reaction is to calm situations, make others comfortable, etc. And I've got a very high tolerance for odd behaviors. Overlooking odd behaviors is detrimental as fuck in these kind of things. I think it was a normal conversation to ask if your neighbor's dog is friendly, right? A learning moment for next time, I guess. Aside from this, there was one time when we briefly spoke about how deer come through our backyards, and he puts out food for them and the other critters in a few feeders. See him in his backyard sometime, doing what I assume is normal yard stuff and critter feeding. I don't remember any other instances distinctly. That brings us to today. All morning and afternoon, I've been working on a scrapbooking project for my friend's 30th birthday, which is 7 months late for the free time, COVID. Dogs are chilling by our sliding door that overlooks the back deck, large backyard trees. My hot glue and I are minding our own damn business when all of a sudden, Big Dog starts growling and Small Dog starts barking. Regular barks are usually squirrel/chipmunk alerts, but growls are for threats. I looked up and followed their gaze. There, in the trees on the border of our backyard, was our neighbor. He was barefoot and dressed in khaki shorts and a black shirt. He was fussing around near the ground in the middle of the tree line area that separates our expanses of unfenced yards. I figured he was refilling one of the feeders for the animals or something, but I kept watching him because of the back of my head question mark on the sky. Then, he moved. He was already flirting with the property line where he was initially standing. He walked further, several paces into our property, in fuller view of our back deck/sliding door. I watched silently. Because I'm an anxious gal, I do double check my alert reactions. For anyone who hasn't experienced anxiety, it's like having a jumpier needle than your average bear. To make sure I'm keeping my thoughts process relatively rational, I watched like this for a few seconds until he stopped moving. He halted on a patch of land a few paces beyond the property line, obscured by pine tree branches. All I could see was hips down. His knees were pointed at my window. While our yards are unfenced, there's an unspoken boundary: neighbors don't cross here. It's a sloppy-looking star shape. There is a house at each point, and the expansive backyards all meld, converging into the center lawn. He had no business being in our area of the yard. There is nothing else to look at. It's our twin flex, and it's our side of the home. Which begs the question, exactly what the fuck are you doing, sir? Get your trees out of my tree. Get your knees out of my trees. Oh, I guess that's where the title comes from. The best excuse I can come up with is that he was wistfully surveying his home and yard with the pride of a man who mows it himself, but that's a long shot. Doing anything resembling looking at his own home yard would have required him to rotate his body more than 70 degrees to the left. I stood up in the middle of the room and approached the window so he could see me looking out directly at him. Keeping him in my peripheral, I glanced around briefly to find my phone so I could take his picture, which I am happy for him to see me doing in broad daylight. I couldn't find it though, so I just watched. My body was stable, but I noticed my bones started shaking a little. I think I was having that behind the scenes brain acknowledgement that there was no other explanation for him to have been postured like that, faced towards me. After about 30 seconds, he casually walked over back to the side of his property and made what looked to me like a half-assed attempt to look like he was just picking a few things off the ground, like you do to clear a few pieces of litter. Paused in his yard, still obscured by the trees from the hips down. He was stationary. I walked to our bedroom to get a closer view of out of our partially drawn blinds. In the 5 seconds it took to walk from the main room to our bedroom, he disappeared. I immediately called my boyfriend at work to let him know what's up. He agreed that it was weird, and he's the polar opposite of dramatic. Very understated. I walked out on my back deck in what would have been full view if he had still been outside, and knocked on my neighbor's sliding glass door overlooking the deck. I told her what I noticed, and we agreed it was weird. She asked if big or small react negatively to the neighbor. I said no. She agreed that it was weird, and we're on the lookout now. We both went outside and blatantly stood where he was standing to get a good look at the view. It was a clear shot to our window. I noticed it was dark inside my home, so even though I was standing in plain sight and staring at him, he likely wouldn't have seen. I posted 2 pictures to give a clear idea of the scene. From my perspective, look above the A and blah blah, basically describing the that was provided. I texted my landlord next, and he doesn't know the man at all. My landlord's mother-in-law lived in the space before us, and she hadn't mentioned anything. He was quick and responsive and encouraged me to call our sheriff's office. I touched base with my boyfriend again, too. I asked about Big Dog's reaction to the neighbor, just to be sure, and that's when I found out I was wrong. Apparently my boyfriend noticed Big Dog growls at the neighbor, her up every time he sees him. No one else, only him. As far as I'm concerned, 3 strikes you're out, baby. My weird feeling, my dog repeatedly growling, and knees in the trees. I have my eyeballs trained straight on you, motherfucker.
Wow.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Not as intense, I would say.
But still had some creepy vibes to it.
Yeah, it's definitely some creepy vibes. As you can tell, I've been reading far too much.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think about that?
I'm just wondering, like, did Opie ever figure it out who that person was?
Well, he's obviously like the neighbor, but it's like,
But it's still weird because, like, the fact that only the big dog growled at that man, but that dog has never growled at anyone else. It's like, okay, at some point, they've had to met that person, but who is the person? Like, is he like I don't know. Like, I'm trying to rack my brain about all the questions. Like,
remember when it was mentioned, the neighbor mentioned that the big dog like barks at him from the window? So it's like already there was kind of like that weirdness. Yeah, no, that's honestly imagining like being in the same situation is, especially if it was like, we didn't have like close knit neighbors like that, like literally like physically.
yeah,
I would go from 0 to 100 so fast.
me too.
That's so cool.
It's disturbing.
I think I'd piss myself.
Yeah.
Jeez. Anyways, yeah, that was knees in the trees.
Trees.
Very
Well,
creepy.
yep. Alrighty. So now it's, I guess, my turn. Woo! Alrighty. So the title is "The Girl Wouldn't Stop Laughing When She Climbed Out of the Trees and Tried to Break into My Car at 4 a.m." This is from underscore endorse toy. Endorse toy. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly.
Endorse toy? Yeah.
Endorse toy?
No, yeah.
Okay. And this was made 12 days ago.
Oh, shit. That's very recent.
Yeah, but here's the story. Almost a year ago, I was an opener at a resort, clocking in before 5 a.m. each day. The resort is located inside of an affluent neighborhood in a very wealthy town/suburb. Employees had to park in one of two parking lots at either ends of the property, and the lot I chose was adjacent to a long, windy road outside the resort, which led to the rest of the neighborhood. The road and resort were separated by a short range of bush and trees that no one ever walked through. I'd arrived one morning per usual and put the car into park with my headlights still on. The lights in the lot weren't ever on in the morning since no one else really showed up before 6 a.m. when the sun was out. So it was usually always dark at the start of my walk. Save for security, I was one of the first employees to arrive on the property each morning, and was usually completely alone in this particular parking lot at this time. This morning didn't seem any different. I had my hands literally at my keys, my brain is in the process to turn off my car, when I noticed a young girl, maybe like 14 or 15 years old, come scampering. Her body language was the exact definition. Run with quick light steps, especially through fear or excitement, through the span of trees that separates the resort from the outside road. She was directly in front of my car, and my headlights illuminate a clear view of her in the pitch black. She looked like she was in high school, with long blonde hair, and was wearing a jacket with pajamas maybe, like she just walked out of the house. One thing about her that bothered me was that she wouldn't stop laughing and smiling. I couldn't hear her laughing from outside the car, but she was visibly giggling at something I wasn't aware of or could see, and it was so unnatural. She occasionally glanced behind her as if someone else were there waiting away from the headlights. She then waved at me like if it were a normal gesture at this time, and then immediately ran to my passenger side door. All this happened in a matter of seconds, and I wasn't really sure what was even happening besides my anxiety spiking. I know I simultaneously yanked the aux from my phone to shut whatever song had been playing off while grabbing for the lock button. I remember feeling panic for never remembering if it's up or down to lock when the girls began pulling violently and insistently on the door handle on the passenger side. I realized because I didn't turn my car off, it stayed locked. She began pounding on the window, and I was screaming at the top of my lungs for her to leave before pressing on my horn. I could see her laughing outside like this were some type of game, as if I were a silly friend not letting her in as a joke. After a few seconds, she stopped pounding and trying to open my car door. Her face fell flat like I disappointed her, and she started to walk away from my car back the way she came. She waved at me again before squeezing through the trees out of the view of my headlights. This whole encounter confused me almost as much as it scared me. Most people I told the story to just chalked it up to her being on drugs, but that narrative hasn't felt right to me despite her behavior. Maybe she was just being an extremely out-of-touch teenager whose parents needed a firmer grip on her. My first thought was possibly human trafficking, but I'm not sure if that would fit the scenario, as I'm not the most well versed with the subject. I told someone when I made it to LP, but they didn't seem to care much. I didn't call the police, and I regret that. I'll never get out of my brain, though, how fucking off the feeling was watching a stranger, seemingly alone, popped out from the trees in the darkness, laughing and then trying to violently enter your car in an empty parking lot.
Oh.
I do think the possibility of someone else being present the whole time is a lot more scary. And I wonder who else was there and where exactly. Oh, yeah.
Holy crap. Like, actually, the human trafficking scenario wouldn't be that too far off.
Mm-hmm.
However, typically, I've heard a few stories about it, where typically it'll be like a woman who's like, "Oh, please help me," or like, "Hey, can I hitchhike?" or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, like she was acting like purposely like erratic. So it's like, was she actually being a stupid teenager? And maybe she was doing like trying to do like a prank or dare where somebody was, somebody else was like hiding in the bushes or tree line to like, see if it'll play out. Or was it really the case of like that?
Yeah. Just, I don't know. It just, ooh, that sends chills up my spine.
Yeah, me too. Also, I think it's just dangerous to do on her end.
Yeah.
Because, like, if she is just like a stupid teenager, like, what if the person you're bothering has like, a gun in their car?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
what if they have like a temper? So,
Yeah.
that's fucking weird. I would fucking. The idea of like random ass people like going to my car as I'm inside it, like, that's one of my biggest fears, especially like in parking lots or more isolated areas.
Yeah.
Oh, gives me
Yep.
goosebumps.
Ugh. Well.
Well, how are you feeling? Let's see. How much time do we have left?
Mm.
It's 3:53.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was I still feel bad because my stories were a little longer.
Yeah. But
I promise next time to actually overview the length. Because at first I was like, okay, this is not too bad. Maybe the second one will be shorter.
nope.
It wasn't. Well, technically, not even a lot happened in the story. It's just the story formatting was very like long.
Yeah. But yeah, it was still, yeah. I mean, still, these stories, ugh.
Yeah, I would say obviously my first story being like the darkest. However, I would say your second one is just very much like a real life like fear I kind of have.
I think it's a lot of a fear for a lot of people, especially who work in like, who have to go in like in the early mornings,
Yeah.
like where it's still pitch black. It's like, that's a
Mhm.
fear of a lot of
Especially
people.
for like women.
For women,
Especially.
yeah.
Who are in that like situation. I mean, that's why I think it's really important to like if you are like doing some sort of job at a very extreme time, whether it's early in the morning or late at night, even in the middle of the day, honestly, like I think you should always have somebody else to work with you.
Yeah.
Like that just makes sense in terms of like safety.
Yeah.
So
Oof.
yeah, but yeah, guys, thank you for joining us on this episode of Closet Chat.
Yay.
I hope y'all have had a good week and had a good weekend as well. And if y'all have any like suggestions for like any stories from like the subreddits, whether it is
Our,
let's not meet, yeah.
that's not me. Am I the asshole?
Mm-hmm.
Entitled parents.
Ooh, that one would be kind of a fun one to look over.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, even a suggestion for like a subreddit or in general,
Yeah.
I think that could be pretty fun. So,
Yeah.
um, like I said, thank you for joining us on this episode.
Yep.
I bid y'all a good afternoon.
I bid you a good evening.
I bid y'all a good night.
And I bid you a good morning.
Adios.
Adios.